Music Not Diving is brought to you by Acid Nation. What is Acid Nation? Well, it is a D2C platform, a direct-to-consumer platform. So if you're selling music as an artist or a label, or if you're a fan of music looking to connect more directly with your favorite artists and labels, well, this is a great place for you to be spending your time and your money. D2C is dominated by one particular platform. We know who they are. We've talked about them a lot on the show, and we like them a lot, by the way. But Acid Nation are offering quite a bit more in terms of ancillary services and ways in which they can help labels and artists selling on the platform. So, for example, they have their own pressing plant. They can fulfill your vinyl orders on demand, taking them in, pressing the vinyl, and sending out the stock to fans. They have their own streaming platform too, which pays out 1 cent per stream, not pro rata either, a direct payment of 1 cent per stream. That is basically unheard of and a really great thing, actually. So, Acid Nation, we use them for Hot Flush recordings. All of our stuff is on there, and we couldn't recommend them highly enough, basically. So head over to acidnation.com to check them out.
This is Music Not Diving with Scuba.
Welcome to the show. I'm Scuba. This is Music Not Diving. Okay, we're talking UK bass type stuff on the show this week. We've been in the kind of techno world for the last couple of weeks, but moving into, UK stuff right now on this show. Sam Binga is a name which has been known to me for a couple of decades at this point. I mean, his Bao Binga stuff in the kind of breakbeat scene of the, I suppose, mid-2000s was really great. And our paths haven't crossed a ton in the time since, but he's been doing really interesting music, basically, I mean, for the whole period, absolutely, in different genres, but I think always with a kind of half a foot in that kind of UK-based sound system culture kind of world. So great to have him on. He's someone who thinks deeply about this stuff and talks really well about it too. So yeah, this is, I think, a good episode that you're going to enjoy. So without further delay, let's get on the phone with Sam Binga.
Brought to you by acidnation.com.
Sam Binga, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Wow, really? Are you really a long-time listener?
Intermittently. I listened to the Spodcast one yesterday. The Spotify one yesterday.
Really?
Yeah,
so...
and there's a few of the dub techno ones I really enjoyed as well.
Okay. Well, we can talk about some of that Spotify stuff if you like. We've just been, I just put it up on YouTube, and I just got the ads. They have to give you an ad rating, and basically, if you fail the ad rating, it means you can't promote it, basically. And to get anywhere on YouTube, you've got to stick a few quid behind each video. And we've been rejected on that video because of US election coverage stuff.
Amazing.
I mean, I don't know what, kind of billionaire person I've enraged. I can think of one that I might have enraged. But or maybe not. I spent quite a lot of time defending him, actually. So,
oh, yeah, I think I know who you're talking about then.
Yeah. I mean, people... Actually, to be honest, I was a little bit worried that everyone was going to be angry with me about that, but there seems to be like a decent sort of cross-section of opinion on that stuff, so it's kind of okay. Yeah.
I thought it was pretty solid. I definitely agree with the stuff about TikTok because, you can even feel it yourself, like your just appreciation for anything that doesn't grab you instantly just goes down, you know? Absolutely.
It's like really scary, actually, and it is unbelievably addictive. I mean, I actually don't use TikTok a lot, but I am totally addicted to Instagram Reels, and they've basically copied the algorithm, haven't they? And it's fiendish. But I mean, as soon as you spend a little bit of time on TikTok, you realize that it is even worse. Like, it's really scary.
Yeah, it's impressive how they've done it. And yeah, I've got a personal Instagram account. I don't know if you got one as well, but like I found that separating out the work Instagram from like a personal one was really useful. And on my personal one, they've changed how the layout is, so that whereas before you'd swipe one way and get to your DMs, which is, chatting to your mates or whatever, now that swipe takes you to their single reel TikTok style thing. Right. And again, it's just like, they're just trying to lock you in, It's just straight to the crack pipe, basically. Yeah, 100%. Just mainline it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how you doing anyway? What's been going on? I haven't talked to you for ages, really. And actually, to be honest, because our paths have crossed kind of intermittently over the course of basically 25 years at this point, nearly, right? Getting on for that long anyway. But I mean, we've never really, done a ton of hanging out together, have we? But, love to have you on the show.
No, I really appreciate it. And I think like the sort of longest time we spent together in person was the show with MOT last year. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
Yeah, 2 years ago. Yeah,
with
yeah,
Rosca, and then you and I was back to back Jay Carter, which was wicked.
Yeah, right. So what's going on with you at the moment, generally speaking?
It's been a busy year, I put a mixtape out. I call it a mixtape because it was like pretty much all collaborative. And I didn't see it as being like the sort of grand artistic vision that you might try and put on an album. Like there was no heartfelt ambient tracks that everyone skips. But that was really good fun. And it was a lot of fun learning how to do that because that was on my own label, Pineapple. So it was quite a fun process figuring that out, and then followed that up with the Sir Hiss album, which I've got to say has had the most insane reactions on a mail out that we've ever got. Like
really? Everyone
from High to Sammy Vergie, nice. Reacting crazy to him. So yeah, it's been wicked.
Great. And is that also coming out on Pineapple?
That's out now on Pineapple, yeah.
Yeah, right. So actually, this is a good question because I had one person ask me, a member of our Patreon actually, and he basically messaged me asking, is it worth self-releasing these days? And it sat in my inbox for ages, and I've now asked it on 3 different podcasts, so I hope that makes up for me ignoring it for a couple of weeks. But is it worth, or what is the benefit? What are the kind of pros and cons, do you think, in 2025? Because it's obviously changed a ton over the time that you've been doing music. But tell me about what you think about self-releasing now, and also perhaps whether it's worth self-releasing if you were getting started, because obviously you have a wealth of experience doing this stuff. So think about these things.
Wealth is maybe exaggerating a little bit,
Well, a lot of experience.
Small savings account of experience, perhaps. But I guess, again, similar to what you said in the podcast, I think if you're just starting out, it can go amazingly. There are some people who just come straight out of the gate and everyone's just locked in. And in that case, that can work. But even so, more time they'll have put something out somewhere else, which has a bit of an audience. The main thing is that hopefully a label will have some kind of audience and some kind of resources behind it. Because otherwise, if all a label is doing is putting a post on Instagram, putting a release up on Bandcamp, and that's it, then there's no point giving them half your income. But in 2025, if that's all a label's doing, then I don't think that label should really exist because it's basically a vanity project. But if a label can do things like fund a video if needed, they've got contacts with, vinyl plants if that's something you want to do. They can put spend on social adverts. They have a mailing list. They have, X thousand, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers on Bandcamp. Then those are people that obviously have on some level resonated with what you're trying to do as a label. And so if you're a new artist, you're kind of just getting straight access to an audience that is kind of primed to accept what you're about. So I think there is still value in it, but it's not as clear-cut as it once was, if we're being brutally honest,
Yeah, it's really subjective, isn't it? The devil is definitely in the detail. I think a really good example of this actually at the moment is the Blawan album, and which is on XL, and it's pretty impenetrable musically. It is certainly pretty experimental, and he has been a really successful campaign around it. He's had a ton of coverage, been on Zane Lowe, all these kinds of things that actually quite a mainstream album campaign would get. And it's entirely because of the label. I'm not saying it's not great music. It is great music, but it's not, commercially accessible music by any stretch of the imagination. It's not the kind of stuff which would normally get covered like this. But being on XL, it's just widened the platform that he's been able to heightened. That was a kind of strange mixing of metaphors, wasn't it? Heightened the platform that he's standing on to promote the records, So it really can, add a huge amount. Absolutely, and that's obviously at a relatively high level. When you're on XL, your label mates with Adele at that point. But even like you say, lower down the pyramid.
Did you not get sent the Adele Blawan collaboration yet?
Yeah, no, I haven't had that yet, actually. I'm looking forward to checking it.
From the dark side.
Yeah, right, exactly. But yeah, it absolutely can, 100%.
I think also if I look back on my own career, when I started the Sam Binga project, I was very lucky to kind of pretty much start off with 2 of the main labels in sort of weirder drum and bass, which was at the time Exit and Critical. And again, that kind of stopped the situation that I've had at other points in my career where you're kind of schlepping sounds like a horrible word, but you're building it step by step from smaller labels upwards. And if that doesn't happen quite quickly, then you can just kind of become, a face in the crowd of, oh yeah, that guy puts stuff out occasionally. Whereas like having someone like Kazra or D-Bridge say, check this out to people that obviously know that they're legends, then yeah, again, it's that thing of like, obviously on a smaller scale than XL, but it's still the thing of like, you need to check this out. This is worth your time when there's so much music getting released,
Yeah. And, particularly amongst, in this kind of music where it's quite very genre specific. So you have certain people, those are two great examples, whose opinion really carries real weight, and that kind of cosign, the first sign obviously being you, because presumably you like your own music, but like, that kind of validation absolutely goes a long way, doesn't it? Totally.
That's the interesting point about like, do you like your own music? And I think a lot of people struggle with that,
Yeah.
Because I remember when I started out, I sent out my very first demo and I was like, well, this is terrible. I'll never get signed off this. This is back in the days of mailing out CDs. And it got picked up. And I had to have a word with myself where I was like, look, if these people who are to some degree professionals think that what you're doing is worth releasing and worth pressing onto vinyl, maybe I've got to just trust them. So there is also a bit of that as well. And I think the other aspect of it is the A&R side of it. So with, say, Hiss's album, this is the longest project he's done as a solo artist. And it's been 2 years of going back and forth, checking, a huge range of demos, widening it down from 50 or 70 demos down to the 12-ish that got released, working through them. And I guess because I'm a producer as well, I was able to give both that creative advice, have you thought about bringing in a string line here? And also technical thing of this isn't going to work in a club, or this kick isn't punching, or, put a Raging Amen in. No, I didn't say that last one, but that's something that's really important as well, because if you're doing everything yourself from the artwork to the release schedule to the promotion and making the music, it can be very much a sort of lonely space to be in. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Is this is this the first time you've directly A&R'd someone else's album?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? It's an interesting process. How much direct A&R input have you had on your stuff over the years?
From other people?
Yeah.
Kazra's pretty hands-off generally. Kazra was always, you think it's good? Yep, love it, let's go for it. Apart from the one record I did where it was my attempt to mix dancehall into up-tempo music. So it was drum and bass speed, but it was all vocals with Ryder Shafiq. It was all the kind of the boggle rhythm, the dum, 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 dum kind of beat.
Yeah.
And I remember when I sort of finally sent him the what I thought were the finished versions, he was really struggled with it. He was like, look, I don't really love dancehall like you do. This is so far out from the label. And let me think about it for a bit. But, again, full credit. He was like, look, you're an artist I believe in. This is something that you want to do. We'll make it work. And it was great. He put it out on vinyl, and he got a selection of sick drum and bass remixes, one of which has been my biggest thing on Spotify forever.
Right.
Thank you, Enai, for that remix. So, I think that attitude is really good as well. You're an artist I believe in. You want to do this. I'll fight. We'll make this work,
Yeah. It's a difficult balancing act, isn't it? Because I've done almost all my stuff on Hot Flush, but there have been exceptions. And I've often thought over the years that actually I might have benefited with a bit more, of someone saying, well, mostly don't do that. Mostly telling me to stop doing one particular thing. I think I've kind of ummed and ahed about that. Over the years. And when I've done, what I actually find is when I do a release on another label, and I've done a couple this year, and I've got another one coming up next month. And I find I think about it quite a lot differently when I'm giving tunes to another label. And maybe that's because it doesn't happen so often. But I find myself really going down the rabbit hole with things and overthinking and tinkering around with stuff where if it was coming out on Hot Flush, I probably would have just said, no, this is done, And often that's quite a destructive process. Actually, the release that I've got coming out next month is actually on Crosstown, and the versions that are actually coming out are the very first versions that I sent Damien, and I sent him like 4 other versions. And he was like, well, no, actually the first one sound better. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me just change this one thing. And like, no, actually the first one actually is better. And at some point you just got to defer to their judgment, don't you? Because it's their label,
I mean, I sometimes think that can be a benefit though, because like we've all had that experience where you're working on a tune and you're pretty sure it's good, and then you get your mate down the studio and you find yourself apologizing for the tune. You're like, okay, obviously that hi-hat's not right, and I'll shorten the breakdown. And it's like suddenly all the stuff that you kind of knew, but you'd sort of kidded yourself about, suddenly that stuff gets out. So I sometimes find like that can happen as well, And I love what you're saying about like it was version 1 that got released, because what was was it Michael Jackson? The one of the mixes for Thriller or something like that. They did like 47 mixes, and it was version 1 they went with.
It's so easy to do. You just think, oh, no, this is just one little thing, and it's completely intangible, seemingly, but there is something there. It's impossible to put your finger on. And I think that's why I think this experience, actually, I've just thought about this as I was saying that, like the experience that all engineers have, and anyone who's been involved with making a record, the kind of mystery around it, I think is a large part of the reason why people think that AI can't do music. And we think that, well, there's no way this weird thing that happens, this seeming magic which happens, which is so hard to define, so hard to put your finger on. I think that's what must be part of why people think, well, no, this AI stuff can't really work, can it?
Have you seen the backlash Timbaland's got to his AI rapper?
Yeah, I mean, I think Timbaland, they must be paying him a fortune, right? They have to be.
To destroy his legacy.
It does seem slightly short-sighted on his part, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's insane.
Okay, we are 15 minutes into this episode, so well done for sticking around so long. I'm just going to take this opportunity to tell you about the ways you can support us on the podcast. Of course, what we really want you to do is like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. You can also join our Patreon. It is our annual pledge drive at the moment. So if you sign up to the musicality tier on Patreon, you get a free Not a Diamond Club t-shirt in your size delivered to your door absolutely free of charge. So that's a great thing to do. Head over to scubaofficial.io/support to check it out. And with that, I'll let you get back to the episode.
I think the thing with AI that, and again, this might be copium, but, there's always been functional club music that doesn't have a huge amount of personality in it. Yeah. And people still love it because of the story about it, like if the early Robert Hood stuff was, didn't have the kind of mystique of Detroit, his struggle from being pretty much homeless when I think he made, the first Minimal, was it Minimal Nation?
Minimal Nation, yeah.
Borrowed equipment, Underground Resistance being these, militant guys from Detroit as well. All that stuff, I don't know if people can really recreate that story, because... Have you read the manual by KLF?
I have read it recently, actually, yeah.
I love the bit in that where they're talking about at some point there'll be 2 tunes released and they're just a kick drum, and they'll be both the same kick drum, and one will be amazing and one will be terrible, and everyone will know which one is which. And I kind of believe that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, because it is intangible and it's impossible to understand. But I think the thing about AI, I don't know how much you've used those tools. Let's talk about that in a moment. But my experience of using them really is that you basically, it's like clicking the randomizer on a plugin, and you click it for ages, and it's just like whatever, and then suddenly something happens. You're just like, oh yeah, okay, that works. And my experience of AI, and I'm not even necessarily talking about generating finished tracks, but just generating anything using an algorithm like that that's been trained. It gets there eventually, I
think the key is where do you go from there? Musicians back in the day would have seen sampling in exactly the same way. It's like, oh, we're just going to take my drum break, and if we'd denied that, we wouldn't have jungle, for example. You know what I mean? But at the same time, you got to take and work with it. So I was hanging out with Machine Drum in LA a bit ago. We were doing some stuff and chatting about how he's been using it. And again, it's kind of like the interesting side of it, I think, is feeding your own stuff into it, creating your own little miniature world that it can feed on. Because otherwise, what you're kind of going to get is you're going to get the regurgitated slop of the average of anything. and that can create quite amusing pastiches, and that's never going to be that interesting. There's been a few pretty funny ones, and I've laughed at some of them, I'm ashamed to say, but they've never been like
the one I got said the other day was the 60 soul version of Wood by Alice in Chains.
Oh man,
and it was awesome. It's so good. It's like completely worked, But I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right to say this. I mean, I think the issue with AI as opposed to other music tech tools, which sort of will seem to work in a similar kind of way, or at least regurgitate things and yield similar results. The problem with it is that they've been trained on people's work, right? And that's the big issue, I think, and people making money out of that training, by selling these products, and particularly a company like Suno, which is going to be worth billions of dollars if it's not already, purely operating on stolen data, basically. And actually, what Lucian Grange, the head of Universal, came out and said the other day, and actually they've said it again today with the announcement that they're going to be doing stuff with Spotify. They're only going to use models which have been trained with the consent of the people that it's being trained on. And that, I think, that doesn't make it all okay or anything like that, but it makes it a lot more okay, I think, than the current Suno thing, which is just a fucking piss take, frankly.
I mean, it's the classic tech thing of, move fast and break things, and it doesn't really matter what they break because they seem to have infinite pockets and they can get away with it. It's like you're saying on the thing about Uber and enshittification, like the Uber's model was 100% going undercut cabs. And again, it's never that simple because cabs were rubbish. Like, it wasn't that long ago. You'd come back off tour and, you'd been in America somewhere where Uber at that point was ubiquitous, and you get in a cab in Bristol, you're like, yeah, I need to go home. Do you take cards? And they'd look at you like you'd shat in their hand, and it's like, it's 2018. What are you doing,
Yeah, totally. And yeah, I mean, the other thing I said on that episode was that, the fines never get close to the increase in market cap that they achieve by breaking the law in the first place. So, I mean, that's definitely a big issue with AI too. It's like the pace at which government works on all of this stuff, the pace at which regulation gets developed, it's like it just never gets anywhere close to keeping up with the companies.
I think, that saying was the devil's greatest trick was convincing money doesn't exist.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like capitalism's greatest trick was convincing governments that regulation is a bad thing. Whereas without proper regulation, you end up with monopolies, you end up with predatory pricing, you end up with environmental degradation, all of these things. And and that's what we're seeing. Like, as soon as Uber had basically decimated the cab industry, it's like, yep, now we're going to charge you way more. You've got no alternative. And like you say, the cabs are going to get worse. So regulation is like the sort of the unwanted, but the unglamorous, but completely vital third leg of capitalism, or at least democracy even perhaps as well,
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, actually, my opinion is that most of what government should do is probably regulation, and the people that work doing that regulation for government should get paid a lot more money.
Massively.
And it should be like a kind of high status, like high prestige job in society.
Yeah.
Instead of what we have now, which is, a kind of a much maligned public sector, basically everywhere in the world, actually, seemingly on most places anyway, certainly in the Western world, and it's low paid and it's low status. And
then you get the revolving door system as well, where it's like, okay, yeah, you can go and be regulated for a bit and then go back to your banking job, having put in regulations.
Exactly.
Which completely benefit.
Back to the private sector, yeah. And then, like, as if by magic, things happen that, might not have happened otherwise without that link in the chain. Yeah. Exactly. Okay. Well, this has been quite depressing so far. What can we talk about which is less depressing? I think that, the stuff I had actually written down to talk about mostly concerned a happier period of music, which was the 2000s and the link between breakbeat and dubstep.
Oh, don't worry, I can make that very depressing as well.
And breakstep. Oh, really? Okay, well, let's try and be slightly
Breakstep is the happy point in that.
Okay, let's talk about Breakstep. Sorry, the much misunderstood, I think, Breakstep.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Breakstep, And this is like, for me, both its strength and I think in a wider sense, maybe the downfall is it was really good fun. You know, a lot of that stuff was really enjoyable, great to DJ. You know, you play 138 track now and it still goes off. Totally. And I sometimes think that there's a problem in dance music, which is that, I mean, it's less now because people don't review music so much, but back in the day, people would always be reviewing music on, say, like a wet Tuesday in a bedsit or whatever. And at that point, the weird, introspective, moody deepness sounds exactly what you want to hear. The upfront, bashy party vibes is like, well, this is a bit much. So I kind of feel it got a bit maligned in that way. But that's the problem, I think, with a lot of dance music.
Yeah, well, I mean, music journalists take themselves quite seriously, don't they, generally speaking? And music which doesn't take itself so seriously, I think, yeah, you're right, actually, is it suffers as a result. You know, because when something is not seen as being cool, and unfortunately Breakstep quite quickly acquired. Well, actually, I suppose it was because breaks at the time was the kind of. I mean, let's give it a bit of context. In fact, how would you describe Breakstep? How would you differentiate it from the break scene at the time, which probably most people are more familiar with, maybe? Or talk about give me some definitions. How do you see all this stuff? How did it fit together?
It's really hard to describe it without using loads of problematic terms like urban or anything like that.
People know what you mean when you say urban. I mean,
yeah, it just felt like it had a bit more links to stuff that was happening in terms of garage and jungle. Maybe it got back to using some of the jungle breaks. It was using some of the garage swing. It wasn't quite the same, and it just felt that little bit more raw. At that point, a lot of breaks, new school breaks even, had got either very polished or had become so cheesy. And actually, so this is another potential rant coming up. It got really reliant on bootlegs. You know, one of the biggest selling break tunes of all time is probably the Pink Panther bootleg, which is just, you know, incredibly uncool. And, you know, like Breakstep was something which was still really enjoyable, but just didn't have quite that air of cheese about it. And it was also happening around about the time, I guess, that, well, kind of like some of the early Hot Flush stuff wasn't Breakstep, but it was that proto-grime, post-garage, didn't really have a name yet, before the Halftime sort of took over dubstep.
Oh, I mean, I would absolutely characterize some of the early Hot Flush releases as Breakstep. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there was at least one Distance tune that we released, which I would absolutely say is Breakstep. Search and Destroy tunes that I would say
Candy Floss, All Time Percy.
Yeah, and the other side of Candy Floss as well. Yeah, we definitely saw it as being at least, we saw Breakstep as being kind of one of our inputs, I think. And absolutely, it was a part of Forward. The early years of Forward, as you said, before the half step took over, you know, everyone knows, well, I think most people know that Forward started as a garage night, but there was the kind of that mid period, or the kind of early, the end of the beginning of Forward, those kind of years, there's 2002, 3, 4, maybe into 5, where the music was very varied, actually quite wide ranging, and there was still garage getting played. There was breaks, there was Breakstep, and there was the dubstep stuff, which eventually kind of ate the whole thing, or rather, I think that what happened first is that all of it started getting called dubstep, and then the half step sound took over dubstep, I suppose, is probably basically what happened. But yeah, I mean, Breakstep absolutely was part of what we were into and thought we were doing with the label. And yeah, I think you're right. It was different to breaks because, yeah, the whole kind of Rennie Pilgrim side of breaks was the kind of sort of, I suppose, the polished, almost like house influence kind of side of it. And then there was stuff like the Break Fasters and Stanton Warriors to an extent, and all that stuff, which I suppose is what you're saying, which got a little bit sort of cartoony, didn't it?
I can tell you what happened. What happened is Pendulum came out. And because I was on that harder side of breaks, like, you know, which is also why instantly when I first heard Jada Flex, who I think at some point Jada Flex, like the Jada Flex, the Metal Messiah post needs to happen, because his One Extra show was integral for all this.
I really want to get him on the podcast, actually, because he's not really seemingly involved too much in the scene anymore. But
I think he's a personal trainer now.
Absolutely, he's what?
I think he's a personal trainer now.
Oh, is he? Okay, well, yeah. I mean, he was always a unit, wasn't
built.
he? Yeah. But I mean, his One Extra show, absolutely, as you say, was crucial, 100%.
So yeah, so like at the time that I was hearing all that kind of stuff, like the Jada Flex, early Search and Destroy, Slaughter Mob, you know, all these guys, early Distance stuff. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want out of dance music. Because, and another diversion here, but like so much of breaks wasn't what I wanted to be doing. It was, I did it because I was scared to make jungle, you know? I did it because I was scared to make D&B. I didn't think I had the chops.
D&B was intimidating, wasn't it, at the time?
Really intimidating. And like with breakbeat, I heard it, I was like, okay, this is cool, but I think I could add something here, which in hindsight is the worst reason to sort of do
I don't know. I think that's a reasonable outlook to have.
Possibly,
I could make
but
a contribution here. Right?
Yeah, but it wasn't the contribution to something that I like fully loved. It was like, this will do.
Right.
And that you can never do that. It's got to be passion.
Yes. Okay.
So when the Breakstep stuff started coming out, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I'm into. This is a tempo that I love. It's got the energy of the stuff that I'm writing. It's that little bit cooler and moodier. And this is super exciting. And at the same time, Pendulum happened. And a lot of the people that I was working with or that I was kind of put together with, like the Breakfasters, and no shade to them, they're amazing producers and they've gone on to have #1 hits. But I think a lot of those guys heard Pendulum and were like, yeah, this is amazing. This is massive riffs. It's really, really loud. And it's got a snare that takes your head off. And I was just like, oh man, this is not where I want to go. I remember me and Ed ID, we had a meeting with a label guy who wanted us to do like a compilation of, you know, what we thought was exciting in breakbeat at the time. And we sent him like a collection of tracks, like these are the producers and some of the styles we want to hit up. And the reaction was, I don't understand this music.
Okay.
And I was like, at that point, he was like, oh man, I should have. And the stupid thing is I kept on making it and I should have jumped off and gone to like early dubstep, which is what was actually exciting at that time. But, you know, I was scared, if we're honest.
Yeah. This is when you were called Bao Binga, right?
A name that no one could ever pronounce or spell, and I flew around the world having it mispronounced and misspelled. Yeah.
Wait, well, have I just pronounced it incorrectly?
No, you're about as good as you got. I mean, technically, it's Bao Binga. It was like a Chinese dessert I had when I lived in Shanghai. And I always thought like, when I get signed, I'll find a better name and I'll switch this. And of course, the first label was like, yeah, really unique name. You should definitely keep that. And he's like, oh man.
Okay, but you have always had lots of different aliases. That's definitely a feature of your output over the years, is the willingness to spread yourself quite thinly across different monikers. Yeah, that's the thing. We were emailing before this. I forgot you were Skins, because Skins was the forward type stuff. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. That was my sort of dabbling toes in that water to greater or lesser effect.
Yeah.
I still really like some of those tunes, but
yeah, good.
I had no idea how to like market any of it, or also, you know, I wasn't do the things that you have to do to really integrate into that scene, which would have been like going to Herbal every week, living in London, going to Forward on the regs and all that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, where were you living in Bristol?
Manchester at that point.
Manchester, right.
So the one Forward I went to was like a long night, you know?
Okay.
We there and back from Manny in one night driving.
Right. Okay. Is that where you're from originally?
I'm from Hull originally, more for my sins.
Really?
We keep that quiet.
Okay. When did you move to Manchester?
I moved to Manchester for uni, so like 19, kind of, you're 19 years old.
Okay, right. Yeah. Yeah, we were saying, I talk about aliases. Aliases is it's kind of fallen out of fashion, hasn't it? And partly because of, I think, the way the DSPs work now, and, you know, the degree to which you're rewarded for, you know, building up followers on platforms over time.
Definitely the second, I think, you know, it's like starting a new project now it's press shots, it's growing Instagram, it's growing a following, and it's not like back, because, yeah, part of the, sorry to interrupt there, by the way, but part of what I loved about Aliases was like Dillinger is Cybertron, is whoever, you know, bam, 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 because he could put out a record and the distribution was kind of set, you know, all the distro had to say was, oh, this is Dillinger under a new name.
Yeah.
And the shops would be like, this is sick. And you could sell it that way. Yeah. And, you know, you could run a few thousand records that way.
Yeah,
there wasn't
8,000 records just gone immediately. Yeah.
My biggest selling vinyl release is my first one. And let me tell you, with that tune, it was all done on a one hardware sampler. And I hadn't quite internalized the thing where, you know, because MIDI's sequential. So if you have too much stuff happening on beat one, it won't all hit at the same time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. They used to drive me up the wall. It really did when I was first starting out.
There's just parts of that tune where it goes out of time. And I was like, oh man, what do I do here? So I just put a flanger on it and cool edit for those bars. So
nice.
It sounds kind of cool now, but like it was literally because it was out of time.
I mean, that is a great example of being forced into something which you would never normally do by the shortcomings of your equipment. And that's something we've talked quite a bit about on the show recently, or over the longest time, in fact. Like the creative benefits of having those quite harsh limitations imposed upon yourself. Because I mean, like, you know, as you said, it sounded quite cool and not like anything else, presumably.
Yeah.
So
I think you see that in the rise of stuff like trackers, you know, like back in the day, anyone who's on a track would be like, this is the most insane way to make music. I can't wait till I can see the waveforms and drag them around. And now everyone's like, oh, I can see all the waveforms and drag them around, but I was doing the same thing over and over again. Then you're like, oh, you work in different ways, you get different results, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that's something that's piqued my interest. What was your first setup then? What was the sampler in question?
I've still got it down here. I use it as an effects unit occasionally. It's a Yamaha A3000. Okay. And once I figured out how to route the modulation wheel on the keyboard to the filter cutoff, then game over. You know, it's just so much fun. And it still is. I still kind of miss that workflow in a way of just being able to jam stuff in so quickly. And I guess I do similar stuff now with hardware synths. But yeah, that was just, the filters sounded great on it. The effects were, for the time, really good fun. The converters added a bit of crunch, which was nice. And like, yeah, some of those records I still think sound really good. Some of them are absolute rubbish, but yeah, a few of them came out nice.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, if you're doing a few good ones early on, then that's, I think, probably better than most people. What was it that led you to acquire that sampler in the first place? Like, what had your previous musical involvement been?
I grew up playing piano, classical piano, and drums. And
classical piano, really?
Yeah, which you wouldn't know from my one-note specials nowadays, but but like, yeah, that was my sort of my roots of it. My dad was really into Wendy Carlos, you know, the kind of switched on Bach, massive modulars, recreating classical music. And so I kind of, from early, I was hearing weird bleeps and bloops, and maybe that seeped in somewhere. But yeah, I kind of dropped it all when I was a teenager because I was like mountain biking. I'm going to become a bike designer.
Really?
And yeah, it's bizarre. I was just obsessed with mountain bikes. I was terrible at riding them, but I just loved all the tech because, again, I guess like in a parallel to where music was in the 90s, where we hadn't figured it all out. Same with bike design. People were trying to figure out, how do you do suspension? Well, do you do this way, or do you have a lever, or do you have a elastoma, all that stuff. And so I was like, this is so exciting. All of my A-levels were like maths and physics and stuff. And I was like, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to make cool bikes.
Right. Wow. So what happened?
I started having nightmares. I started having literal nightmares where I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get my degree, and then I'm gonna graduate, and then I'm gonna get a master's, and then I'm gonna get married, and then I get certified, and then I get a job, and then I'm gonna retire, then I'm gonna die, and it just all started to feel like it was just so planned out. And with hindsight, that was daft because you can do anything with your life, but it really felt real at that point. And so I had this thing of like, okay, I'm gonna cancel all my offers from uni, I'm gonna take a year out. What have I always been fascinated by? Music. You know, I'd had like a little Atari and Cool Edit 2000, whatever, or like I had a DX11 actually, which my mum got me when I passed grade 5 theory.
Nice.
So I'd sequence that off the Atari and just make little bleeps and bloops on that. So I kind of was like, okay, I got to just rethink my whole life. I'm going to study music tech. I'm going to take a year out and then we're going to give this a go. And yeah, here we are.
Wow. Really? I mean, so it was like a complete, you know, fork in the road. Could quite easily have, you know, decided, no, this is crazy, let's go and do the engineering thing as originally planned.
My mum still blames the career advisor who, when I graduated, and I was like, you know, I think I might really try and give this music thing a go. And the career advisor went like, yeah, you might as well, you regret it otherwise. And Mum was like, that was the worst advice ever.
Wow. I mean, yeah. I mean, do you ever seriously consider what the alternative lifetime would have been?
Yeah, quite a lot.
Right.
I mean, probably like a bit better paid and a lot worse traveled and with less friends around the world. So,
right.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. I mean, I did go to uni and had to work and basically went through the whole thing and had what was nearly
or certainly over 5 years of crushingly depressing work after uni before I was able to kind of knock it on the head and go pro, as it were. And
what did you train? What was your uni course?
So I did history and specialized in education, actually sort of modern political history basically, and did a sort of thesis on education policy. And so I went to work in education for 5 years, worked at the Department of Education, doing policy stuff, amongst other things, for basically 5 years. Hated every minute of it. Was the worst possible employee. But also quite early on, started a label, and so was, also playing on Rinse every Thursday, turning up. I played on Rinse basically every Thursday, 11 till 1. Had to go into work on Friday morning every week. Not every Monday, it was literally every week. So every Friday was a complete write-off. And but honestly, was just crushingly depressed with my existence, basically. And so when it eventually happened that I was able to quit, and I was 27 by the time I was able to quit, I'd very much experienced what that reality was going to be for me, and it was not a good reality. So I was, that's, essentially the best thing that's ever happened to me, really, was walking out of the office for the last time, sorry.
Yeah, and, I guess my journey's sort of similar-ish in that, like, when I left uni, I knew that, because I'd done the music tech degree, I knew that, like, I had to go for it, but also I had to live in Manchester, and I had to, pay rent. So I went out and I got a job in a call center, which at the time was so easy. And I think that's like something that's not discussed enough in terms of like the current state of British music. Is like the early 2000s, there was money in the economy, there were jobs. The criteria for getting like unemployment was nowhere near as strict as it is now. And you could just graduate and then spend a few years essentially about, it felt like. Like you could, obviously for you went and got a real job. I went and got a call center job because I knew that I wanted to spend my evenings making music, and then eventually I wanted to go part-time. And then what happened was, I think they outsourced the call center to India. I got a redundancy payment and I used that to go full-time. Right. But yeah, I think that's kind of missing now. Like, I feel like a lot of kids now, graduate, like raving's what you do at uni, and then you graduate, and there's so much pressure now to be like, okay, you've got to start providing for yourself. And rent is much higher than it was compared to incomes. Jobs are more scarce. And there's also like a bunch of Andrew Tate type, manosphere people saying, if you haven't bought 5 houses and got yourself an Airbnb business by the time you're 30, then there's that pressure as well. So that was missing back then.
That whole entrepreneur fetishization mindset is quite strange, isn't it? It really is. And particularly the fact that it, like you say, really targets young people. I mean, it's actually not just men, because there seems to be an increasing amount of female influencers doing the same sort of thing, targeted at young women as well, actually. But obviously, Andrew Tate is obviously the kind of ground zero for that stuff.
The alpha, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. But I suppose what it does actually is it builds on that kind of American self-help kind of Tony Robbins type mindset, but just put it in a kind of social media, Gen Z friendly kind of, post-woke misogynist framework. Do you know what I mean? It's just like quite bad all in all.
So you know what? I'm gonna do an amazing callback and say this goes back to why a label can be a really good thing, because a good label is going to be a community of artists, at least. Yeah. Ideally, it's going to be putting shows on. It's going to at least be sharing tunes between the people on the label. And you're going to feel like you're part of a little community. And music without community, I think, is quite boring. That's why I've always enjoyed collaborating in the studio. It's why I really enjoy doing back-to-backs. It's why I'm so happy that, like, every now and then Pineapple gets to do, like, something really fun, like a takeover at Outlook or a stage at We Out Here or something. Because it's like, these are all people that we can all get on. We're all brought together through music, and we can do this, and we're all in it together. And it's kind of the antithesis of that lone wolf, get what's yours, and retire at 35 with a empire of, shoddily built Airbnbs cleaned by slaves, So yeah, Pineapple, the antithesis, and Pineapple, the way out of Andrew Tate style misogyny.
I mean, I totally agree with the general point about community and particularly IRL community, you know, because I mean, doing stuff online is great, and that was absolutely crucial in that kind of early 2000s, mid 2000s scene that we've been talking about. The online side of that was integral, but without the club bit and without the evenings down the pub talking about music and all the rest of it, and going back home with your mates after raving and all that kind of stuff, without that it's it's not as good, frankly. I was going to say insufficient, but like it's just not the same thing at all, is it really, when it doesn't exist in any way in the real world?
I think there's a reason. Like both Forward and dubplate.net were really important, but it's only Forward that gets lionized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Dubplate.net, eh? Wow.
That's unlocking some deep memories, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember the day that they stopped doing it and everyone went to Dubstep forum. That was an important day in the annals of internet music history.
Oh man, yeah, Dubstep forum. Wow.
Yeah, what was the guy? Dubway was the guy, right, who started it. Oh my God. Yeah, weird. I mean, that's the thing, because actually, I mean, even that, and that kind of online community, because obviously everything like that now is on socials, right? Basically, I mean, you get some of it on Discord and Reddit and that kind of thing, but I think the vast majority of it does happen on socials, and is that as well is a less focused and I think probably less effective way of bringing people together. I don't know, actually, how much do you use Discord, if at all?
I don't, but I'm about to start getting into it because I feel like I just miss forums. Like, I think forums were so good for sharing music, meeting different people, having to be able to hold your own arguments, and just being that sort of like slightly obsessive weirdo person in a safe and controlled space. Do you know what I mean? And I think the community and the intensity they have is needed, You can't get into it on Instagram comments. You can't search through them. You can't find someone saying something 6 months ago or a year ago, I think they were super important and they're much missed.
Definitely. I mean, I would recommend Discord, actually, because it's not quite the same, but it fulfills quite a lot of the functions that those old forums did. In fact, we should both jump up on the we have a Discord server for this podcast, so we should definitely jump up in there after this. Check it out. I mean, what is great about them actually is you just get these heroes of the forum, and those people are just sacred. I remember there was a few people on Dubstep forum who were just there because they just loved it. Not producers, not maybe they did a little bit of DJing, but they just loved the scene and loved being a part of it. And that's what community is, right? It's just people doing it for the love of the game, basically.
Yeah, this is the problem, I think, with, not a problem, but like, it's a shame when everyone's goal is to become the headline DJ. You need just some ravers.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, and America's woken up.
Okay, no, don't worry. It's actually, I mean, it's an interesting thing, actually, isn't it? Because I absolutely do agree with that sort of statement. However, I mean, I had this conversation on a podcast that I recorded earlier this week. The podcast just blend into one, to be honest. But we were talking about how what is a scene, and the degree of participation that people have in it, and how the extent to which it makes it stronger, people's participation, and the difference in participation, and whether it's the extent to which it's good that everyone that buys records is also a DJ. And having that, the depth of that participation being good, and perhaps sometimes going a little bit far and being bad. But, I think the people's commitment to being in the crowd, like whoever they are, like even those headliners, the headliners, I mean, the headliner is kind of like evolved into a slightly maligned figure, haven't they? But I mean, the willingness to get your hands dirty and get involved, that's a key part of it, isn't it?
100%. I guess, if I think about it, like, I was that guy in the crowd wanting to be the DJ at some point, and that is the kind of natural way of it. But I started from, being in the crowd, buying the tickets, going to the events, having that moment, seeing Jeff Mills, go ham sandwich on his 909 at Sankeys, that was just mind blowing. And we've got to have that, you've got to be willing to just put those hours in.
Absolutely. So what were your first key experiences with this stuff in the crowd?
I mean, jungle and techno. Like hearing Valley of the Shadows for the first time, and then eventually getting to go to some mad jungle nights in Manchester. My favourite of which, maybe not a favourite, but a core part, because it was on a Thursday, so as a student that was quite doable, were rejoiced in the name Viagra Fools. And the tagline was, for those who like it hard all night, and it was just rinsing D&B.
Okay.
And then also, that was kind of peak
what year are we in here? What's
late
the
90s,
kind of time?
late 90s.
Okay, yeah.
And then I guess also
Manchester, but Manchester had a bit of a funny reputation at that time, didn't it? That was when the kind of Gunchester thing was. Well, it's only
second wave of that, I think. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I mean, to what extent was that accurate? Did you sort of feel that in the city?
I felt that a little bit going to Viagra Fools because, it was at a club called Havana's, and, you'd go past some heavy, heavy bouncers. The bit where you put your money in to get in, the cash person was like behind a wooden, sheet of plywood. You only just see her hands coming out or his hands coming out doing the change. There's a camera so they could see you. You went through like a metal turnstile, like you were cattle almost. And then you get downstairs in this like dark, sweaty basement, and there's a bunch of guys in big puffer jackets, quite clearly shotting.
Yeah.
Okay. So it definitely, I think I maybe noticed it more on a sort of like actually understanding it level a bit when people started to bring dubstep and grime to Manchester. And I think a lot of pros really struggled because the police were like, this feels gang related. It's got MCs. We're not having it. And like, it took a while for the dubstep to take off in Manchester because just a lot of events were not allowed to happen by the police. They're like, it's MCs. It's going to be Gooch. It's going to be, Cheatham Hill, whatever. And yeah, that was tough.
Yeah. Cause I mean, prior to that, the rollout of garage and latterly grime had gone quite badly, hadn't it? I think quite a lot of places outside London, because I remember being down in Bristol, similar sort of time at uni, and the garage nights really just attracted, the wrong kind of person, frankly, and there were just loads of fights. I remember being at Garage Nation in Bristol in 99 or something, and people just started throwing chairs. Do you know what I mean? It was just like, just a proper like pub brawl in this, quite big club. And I think the reaction that the police had to those parties and to that scene, I think is rightly criticised, but it's not true to say that there wasn't trouble. Like, there definitely was trouble, and it had to be dealt with in some way. I mean, I think that generally speaking, the way the police dealt with it was not appropriate. But yeah, I mean, it was a pretty rough scene, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, and in a weird way, that was kind of. Do you know what? That's where I can put it is this. Like, when I went to Sankeys in Manchester, I felt like I had to behave myself because there were bigger boys there. There were older people who were like mid to late 20s who just looked like real people. And so you didn't want to be the fully gurning mess, although it probably was at some points, you didn't want to be too sloppy. It was like, this is a genuine thing. People really care about this, and you don't want to be a dickhead. And I think in the UK, sometimes clubbing has got very student focused, and you've lost that sense of like, no, this is part of a lineage, and there's certain ways to behave yourself and to hold yourself, which are overall a good thing. Do you know what I mean? Not to sort of lionize things being rough and all the problems that there were in that era, because it was, but there's something to be said for like seeing that this stuff has value as a culture,
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's particularly true in the UK. And I had this conversation with Paul Shinsky from Trezor on the show a few weeks ago. And, we kind of remarked that the kind of Anglo-Saxon attitude to drinking probably exacerbates this, the kind of like, let's go out and get wasted as quickly as possible. And, it's quite a sort of juvenile mentality towards everything. And I think that kind of fans the flames of clubbing being perceived in a certain kind of a way, which is true. It's less true in Europe, I think, and particularly in Germany and, you know, in Berlin in particular. Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely my recollection of that era as well. Like I said, in Bristol. So you were talking about your early experiences clubbing. So Sankeys then actually Sankeys was much more of a house and techno club, right?
Yeah,
Focused
I mean the big night for me there would have been Treble Sessions.
Yeah,
if you remember that. And like seeing Jeff Mills there was mind blowing. Saw Slam there, who I loved.
Nice.
Saw Steve Lawler play a really, really boring prog set, but then his last tune was So Much Love to Give, which I still absolutely love that tune.
I saw Steve Lawler in that era too at the End in London, and that's exactly my recollection of the night. Really boring prog set, and then So Much Love to Give. Hearing it for the first time, I was on a ton of pills and was just like, oh my God, my face is melting.
Yeah, I spent the whole weekend trying to like sing the hook and then forgetting it, and then like half an hour later remembering it and then forgetting it again. And you know, there's a lesson to producers there. You can make all the tasteful bongo jams you want, but at some point you got to put a hook in.
Yeah, I mean, that is a decent hook, to be fair.
Solid.
Yeah, right. So at what point did you start DJing and getting into it, that side of it? Because I mean, you've obviously talked about, you know, having the kind of, you know, road to Damascus moment with the career, but like, you know, there must have been some sort of journey on the way to that point, or was it not, or was it literally as you described?
I was a producer before I was a DJ. Like I bought records because that was the only way you could get them back then, and you know I still got all those records and love them to bits. But I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to make those weird noises. I wanted to make them crazy tunes, and that was my focus. And then as you get into that, you know, naturally, I've got some records. Our mate's got a pair of decks. Let's start learning how to DJ. And it just kind of went from that. And like from very early on, I was always trying to blend stuff together that probably I shouldn't have. Like I remember my first set, I was trying to mix some breaks tune, probably a Rennie Pilgrim tune, into some hard as nails loop techno, and just confusing everyone, which is not talked about enough. Danger of doing multi-genre sets is that you can either play the most obvious tunes from each genre, or you run the risk of leaving everyone a little bit unhappy. Like, well, he played some dubstep, but he didn't play the banger, and he played some techno, but he didn't play the big tune. So that's something I still struggle with in a way, but you know, I think we're at the point now where I know what I'm doing a bit better at least. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a question I enjoy asking people actually is like the idea of like there being a moment at which you become kind of confident in what you're doing, and some people have this and some people don't. Some people it's like a cumulative process, and you know there's almost no meaningful point there where meaningful turning point. But other people have a very defined light bulb moment. Do you have one of those, or are you someone who it's kind of been a kind of slope?
I think I'd probably say I've got a few and they come and go. Like, I remember when I was doing like this sort of deep house, slow-mo house project with my mate Ed again. We were called Bailing and Simpson. We were on Future Boogie. It was that early 2010s project.
I never knew that was you at the time. I actually played a bunch of those records. It was great stuff. Yeah, I didn't know it was you.
We've actually got a bunch of dubs, and I'm kind of planning to do a sort of B&S Lost Dubs album at some point.
Wicked.
But yeah, I remember there was a point me and Ed were sat in the pub in Bristol, and we just had like a really good year. We were starting to get like actually good DJ fees for the first time in either of our careers, because Breakbeat played nothing and no one got it. It paid nothing and no one got it, you know?
Yeah.
So, and it was like, we were playing, and also because it was house, suddenly we were playing to like girls and they smelled nice. It wasn't just like guys in flipping, mildew hoodies or whatever. So it was like, oh, this is great, If trends continue, then next year we should really start to do something. And trends did not continue. Okay. I still don't quite know why, but luckily at that point, Sam Binga kicked off. I started working with Home Unit. We did some stuff. It got on Exit. Then I worked with Critical, and it was perfect timing, because there's that one sort of thing which I'd thought was solid collapsed. The next thing kind of came in.
So, I mean, to what extent though did those overlap in the studio? Because those are very different musical approaches, aren't they? I mean, the house and D&B. I mean,
It was quite short. Like when Bang & Simpson collapsed, it felt quite, like falling off a cliff.
Yeah.
And luckily, Sam Binga as a project got going really quickly as well.
But had you been, making those kinds of tunes for a while, just messing around in the studio, or was it you sat down, we're going to do this new project now and let's kind of do it?
Do you know what? I've got to give credit to Ohm Unit because he was doing some of his sort of early slow stuff, like tunes like Macabre with Chrome Star, the kind of maybe like 85, 90 BPM chuggers.
Yep.
And we used to do an event in this studio, which holds about 20 people with everyone's crammed in. We called it Panhead. It was like a rip-off of Boiler Room. We'd stream off a laptop, we'd get everyone down, people would DJ, we'd stream it on some early streaming software. Then we'd go to the Croft to go to Pinch's night, Dub Loaded. This on a Wednesday night. And it was just super good vibes. We got voted third best club night in Bristol one year for some reason.
Okay.
But we got Jim down. Jim was playing Dub Loaded. So we were like, oh, yeah, do you want to come through and do a set first? And he was like, yeah. I loved what he was playing. And I was like, yo, we should. And he was also playing some of the Bailing & Simpson stuff because we were doing like 105 BPM tunes. So it wasn't too far away from where he was at. So I was like, oh, let's get in the studio, do something. And I thought we were going to make slow house or, chuggy, those chuggy things that he was doing. And he was like, now, you know what? There's some really fun stuff happening in drum and bass right now. Let's do some stuff at 170. And that first tune we wrote was called Triffids. And it came out on Exit on one of their Mosaic compilations.
Yeah.
And I was hooked from that point. I was like, yeah, this is me,
Yeah, right. I mean, had you been into the Autonomic podcast and all that kind of stuff? That's something we've talked about a fair bit on the show. Had you been into that stuff?
Not as much as, say, someone like Charlie. I know Charlie Fracture was I know for a lot of people it was game-changing. Yeah. I knew of them. I checked a few, but it wasn't... I was kind of more excited by what was happening out of Chicago, like the Rashad and that awareness of footwork, Yeah. And that's kind of also how I met, and from that is how I really met Addison Groove, and we started working together, I love all these mad little links, because you don't think about this regularly, but it's like, yeah, from going to like maybe the first Rashad show in Bristol, that's how I met Addison, and we're now working on a load of stuff together. So, from Jim being in town for our weird like streaming event, that's how I started Sam Binga pretty much. So
okay. Yeah, Tony Addison Groove is a great guy. Actually, I need to get him on the podcast sometime. We've talked about it sporadically, but I know him from the early dubstep days. I think we were swapping tunes in 2004 or something. So it's just a crazily long time ago now. It's kind of almost ridiculous. Like,
yeah, for real. I was going to ask you actually, like, how did you evolve Hot Flush? Because you like when I first came aware of Hot Flush, it was the Knowledge, it was Candy Floss, it was that era. And then before long, it was more like the houseier stuff, and moving from that. Was that your taste changing? What was the process?
So basically, DJ El Cid, don't you?
We used to chat on AIM back in the day.
My original partner on my label. Yeah. So Sid and I started a label, and it was explicitly influenced by Early Hospital. So we wanted to have a vibe, but we wanted to be multi-genre. Basically, that was our kind of like grandiose vision for it. We were like, yeah, we're just gonna be good music, man. It's just gonna be like, it's gonna have a vibe, but it's gonna be whatever. So I always had that kind of aspiration to it, that to not be kind of like limited, basically. And then obviously the early dubstep thing happened, and we kind of got involved with it, and it turned into a dubstep label, an early dubstep label anyway. And we were never we never kind of built it out into, what it would be seen now as a kind of legacy dubstep label. And people that know that early scene kind of think of us as being part of it, but we're not kind of like looked at like that, really. I mean, the key thing in the development of it really was me moving to Berlin and getting involved with Berghain and the kind of dubstep techno crossover thing that happens, with Laurie and Skull Disco, Shackleton, and the Berlin techno guys being really interested in what we were doing, and and me loving all that stuff. So that was the kind of first big change. It was like, so we're doing some techno stuff now. So we had stuff like Marcel Dettman remixing on it as early as 2008, and just stuff like that. And then the move into house was basically because as dubstep became stupider and stupider, if I can put it like that, the night that we were doing at Berghain became harder and harder
to program, basically. So we were doing this thing every 3 months at Berkheim, and it started in 2008, and that was the kind of high point of dubstep techno kind of thing. So there was loads of interesting music being made, loads of people.
2562.
Yeah, exactly. And then the cooler side of the London sound. So Malo would come over and play stuff which absolutely made sense. And as the years went on, like when it got to certainly by the time it got to 2011, it was just harder to program a night which I really felt excited about, And the house thing actually was basically motivated by me wanting to play in Panorama. I was just like, I just love this drum. I really want to play that. I want to play long sets. I just want to be part of that thing, And so I just started making house, and you start making stuff and you kind of put it out, and suddenly you're putting out other house records, and before you know it, everyone in dubstep hates you and you're a house label.
And you're actually selling some records.
Yeah, and getting paid for DJing quite a lot of money. So it's
terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, it is slightly corrupting actually when that stuff starts to happen, and you realize there's a whole other world of people earning just eye-watering sums of money, and I could have a bit of that, but then it comes with a price, basically. But but like I said, at the outset of the label, we always sort of wanted to be that, or be something like that anyway. We wanted to, just have something which was known for just releasing good stuff. I mean, it's a ridiculous kind of aspiration to have in some respects, but in the context of it sort of makes sense how it's panned out, over time.
I think the interesting thing there is, like, again, going back to kind of physicality, like it was moving to Berlin. It was being in a place.
Exactly.
The same way that I kind of find like a lot of my trips to America, I find them really inspiring, because there's this whole new generation of kids who've come up and they've raised on Jersey Club and ballet funk and this and they're just playing mad stuff, and it's R&B cut-ups and it's all this kind of crazy stuff. And it's like when you're there in those parties and it's completely like mixed crowd, and you're like, oh yeah, this makes so much sense in this position at this point,
Absolutely.
Again, like, just if all you're doing is getting it online. And really early on in my career, I had someone interview me for a gig in Croatia, and they said something like, why do you think you make the music that you do? And I was like, well, a huge part of it is I was born in England, and without too much effort, any weekend I could go to a city and see world-class DJs. Whereas, like, if you are in, I don't know, Montenegro or Serbia in the early 2000s, that's just not as easy to happen. You're not surrounded by it. And also, like, I think as well, people got to remember that UK radio, because it's publicly owned, and for all the sort of, concerns about the BBC, they've always seen it as their job to support grassroots culture to an extent,
Yeah.
Like, there was no other station in the world on the level of the BBC putting on One in the Jungle with MC Navigator, Marianne Hobbs having, like, basically free run to do whatever she wanted.
Yeah, or Jada Flex for that matter,
Yeah, exactly, And have you been following Elijah's takedown of Current One Extra programming, where it's Joe Budden every 10 minutes?
He has been on the show talking about that very issue. Yeah. Elijah has been on more than once, actually. We did a video episode with him earlier this year. I mean, he's totally right, completely right about that. And it's kind of a bit weird. I actually had Jam Supernova on recently, who is still on BBC, and I tried to get her to comment on it, and she was very diplomatic about it. She basically wouldn't go there. But I mean, extra radio, it's become, I remember when One Extra first started, and I actually try out for an internship there, unsurprisingly didn't get it. But the idea of having that kind of representation, it's great, and it's become it's one of those things where it's sort of seen now amongst certain people, I think, as being this sort of like part of the kind of post-90s, the end of history, kind of like liberal democracy is kind of everything, and is sometimes I think criticized because of that. But I mean, I think it's so valuable, and like you say, to have the state broadcaster giving a platform and giving real resources to this kind of thing. I mean, it adds a lot of value to, if you want to, get cynical about it, it adds value to the economy. The cultural sector is so important. And it's those kinds of investments which really enable that to happen.
I remember the first time I went to Seattle way back in the day, got in a car, there was guys pick me up and put the radio on, and they were playing Soundgarden. I was like, oh man, it's so cool that I'm in Seattle hearing Soundgarden. And the next tune was Nirvana. I was like, yeah, it's pretty cool that I'm in Seattle hearing Nirvana. And then the third tune was Pearl Jam, and I was like, oh wow, this is just...
Hang on a minute. I know what's going on here.
It's, and like there was that point where I think basically it was like a reaction to how lost Radio 1 had got in the early 90s, where they were like, after 7 o'clock, there's no playlisting, Yeah. And that's when I heard so much music that changed my life. And like, I got a shout out Tom's Ravenscroft on his show on BBC Six, which he's now left. But I still, when that was on, I'd regularly get texts from people being like, oh, I just heard your tune on BBC Six. And it's like, that's amazing. That's exactly how it's supposed to work,
Yeah, I mean, actually, the first person ever to play my music on the radio was his dad. And I didn't really, his dad obviously being John Peel for listeners who are not aware, but I didn't really appreciate it at the time as much as I should have done. You know what I mean? It was like...
My one John Peel play was thanks to Jada Flex. He did a mix, because obviously John Peel was, on it with what was happening. And this scene that didn't really have a name, like, I guess we call it proto dubstep now. And there's this remix I'd done for a Breaks label. Jada Flex picked up on it, and that's my one John Peel play.
Right.
So, yeah.
Did you know Hermeet, who is John Peel's producer?
No.
Scottish guy. Hermeet was the person who I first heard suggests the combination of dubstep and techno. And this would have been like, I don't know, 2004 or something. And when I moved to Berlin, when the whole thing started happening, I remember getting an email from him saying, I f***ing told you this is going to work. Because at the time I was like, you must be kidding, dubstep and techno. But yeah, I mean, he obviously had something. But yeah, John Peel, wow, crazy. And like, I think that commonly to a lot of things, I mean, Radio 1 is still, I think, important. I think maybe it lacks the risk takers now that it used to have in John Peel being a great example. I think maybe it's got a little bit safe. Do you think that's a fair comment?
I think so, but I think it's also like, the BBC is constantly under attack from the right, who see it as, disgusting state intervention. And also oftentimes from the left as well, who see it as like not being as radical as it should be. So they've got
absolutely. That's I sort of think that like if both the left and the right are criticising the BBC, it's probably doing something, correct. That's probably about where it should be. Yeah,
I mean, not to get into the hot topic, but on like one of the current conflicts, like my mum's friends all think it's insanely biased lefty nonsense, and a bunch of my friends down here think it's disgusting colonial supporting nonsense. So what can you say?
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing, because when you do criticize the BBC, a lot of people assume that you're some fire breathing conservative. Actually, this was something we talked about with Elijah, actually, because Elijah is critical of the funding model. I mean, I generally think that it's not perhaps perfect by any stretch of imagination, but I'm kind of okay with it as it is. I think like maybe the money could be spent in slightly different ways. Maybe there should be more radio could have more of it, because actually what they spend on radio is very, very little in comparison to other things. But I'm okay with the idea of everyone pitching in to have a, relatively unbiased, only something that pisses everyone off, which suggests that it's probably quite unbiased. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think with a lot of stuff, this is going to sound crazy, but like, it's when you really start traveling a lot that you realize how good we've got it. Like, you go to America and it's so many commercials all the time, and they're just beaming nonsense down your eyes and your ears. And, and there has been no national support for dance music. And, again, we talk about how so much of the roots of dance music, the black and the brown and the Chicago, New York, those roots kind of got left. Well, and they found like more of a home in the UK or Europe. And it's like, well, because there was no support on any kind of systemic level for that in America, and the BBC was able to do that, Yeah. That's not the whole story, of course, and I'm not trying to before it comes to not trying to claim the BBC saved, Black American music. Not that at all. But there was a mandate to support underground music. And when that was what was influencing what was happening in the UK, it was getting supported. And it's been so important,
100%. Yeah, exactly. And as we mentioned previously, also for the development of UK music,
There's been points. I mean, I'm sure you had this earlier on in your career as well, where, it gets to December and you're like, how am I going to afford Christmas this year? And then the PRS comes through because you did a mix for someone's show and you're like, okay, right, I can at least get a train back to see my mum, So.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is one thing which is also not the case in America. Like performance royalties on radio, particularly on BBC, it's substantial. Yes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever had. I mean, I've had one track that got on a playlist on BBC One, on Radio One. I think we got on the B list or something. So we got a substantial number of plays, and it was a ton of cash. Like it really was. I couldn't believe it at the time. It was great. But even if you're just getting spins on, the specialist shows, I think, what is it like? It's like 70 or 80 quid a play or something like that.
Less than that nowadays, but it does add up. The crazy thing was back in the day, before the software got fully developed, they would class a fraction of a play as being a full play. And so, back in the 2000s, there was this thing where, because everyone was mixing on vinyl, tunes were always like 5 minutes or longer. Like I was writing tunes with 3 drops, which is insane to me now. But so, you do these mixes, and if you're mixing quick, you could put, 15 tunes in 15 minutes. And you'd get paid for, 45 minutes worth of music.
Yeah.
And so that 15-minute mix got you paid nicely. And yeah, again, if you're a musician, chances are at some point you'll skin and you need that kind of stuff,
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, we've been going an hour and 15. Well, let's bring it back to what you're here to be talking about, which is, I think, is the album, right? The album that we mentioned previously, coming out on Pineapple. Is that what we are here to talk about, generally speaking? Or
I just kind of fancied being on it, to be honest. Okay. Like I think when we first started chatting, that was the idea, to sort of promote the Club Orthodontics, and I'm happy to talk about that. But like, it's actually just really been fun chatting,
Well, let's do some promo to finish up. The Sankeys Records. Tell me about it. You mentioned that you've been A&Ring it a little bit, but what's the process been like?
That's been quite in depth, That was I think the initial idea happened 2 years ago. I was like, Hiss, you're making some really cool stuff. Why don't you try? And you're making it quickly. Why don't you try and do a bigger project? And it grew from that into whittling down a load of demos, listening them in here, sending them back. The weird thing with that was the kind of finishing stage. It kind of been pootling along for ages. Then, voomp! Suddenly, I think I went for a jog, had the tunes in my headphones, and I was like, hang on, this is basically done. And went back, arranged them into the right order, and I was like, Hiss, I think the album's basically finished. And, that was 2 years of tinkering, just suddenly like, boom, there it is, That was a really exciting moment, like, I think we've got this. And we've been doing the things that you do, we did something quite fun, actually, so I can reach out without knocking everything off. So we did mini discs.
Oh, really?
Which
nice.
Which is, they're super cute, and like, they're really good fun. You can get printing on the body and all that kind of stuff. And in what is possibly the worst phrase I've ever coined, I kind of see these as physical NFTs, which I hate myself for saying that.
Yeah, I think you've just basically meant everyone who's still listening has just turned off.
Physical NFTs, or as we refer to them, as objects.
Right.
But you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know about you, but I still buy vinyl, and I play it a couple of times, and I feel good about that. I'm not carrying a bag of records to a show more time, sometimes, occasionally. But I love it. I love the fact that it's part of this whole ecosystem, all the other things that come with it. So in a way, they're somewhat symbolic, Obviously, some people still love playing vinyl, and like, more power to them. That's amazing. But I think people do want to have a physical way to engage with what you're doing. And like, I don't know how many people have still got working mini disc players, but the response was great. People are like, that's so interesting. And it's a really fun way to engage people. And that was super fun. Did a bunch of launch parties. Just, did one in a pizza shop with a custom pineapple pizza. That was last week.
Nice.
Yeah, super good fun. So Yeah, you know, it's the first time I've really done this, and yeah, learnt a lot. It's pretty intense, but you know, how hands-on are you with A&Ring on this kind of stuff?
It varies, definitely varies by artists. It really, I mean, partly depends on what they want. You know, some people want a lot of input, and genuinely value it. I think other people are more like, this is the music.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I sort of like, I do enjoy doing it, I have to say. I mean, it's like, I do have, I have the tendency, I think, when I'm involved in a music project to sort of take it over, and I really have to try not to do that. You know, I have to try and enable people to, like, you know, maintain full ownership of it. I mean, there's different styles doing it. I mean, we've talked about, I mean, actually, in the early years of this podcast, we had a number of people on who had been on Planet Mu. And so Mike Paradinas and his A&R methods were discussed. And I reached out to Mike, who I don't really know Mike at all, but I reached out to him recently to come on the podcast, and he blanked me. And I think maybe he might have blanked me because he listened to himself being discussed on the podcast before. But he is sort of legendarily very hands-on, you know, so he'll be like, you know, really feeding back on demos as it goes, and picking the running order of the album, and you know, all that stuff. I've never been that hands-on, but I think the times that I have been, I like to think that I've made a positive contribution. I don't know. I mean, but it does vary. Go on.
It is good to go back to the early versions and be like, okay, these are actually better. The ones we put out are better than than version 1. But like you say, with your Crosstown Rebels record, you could be like, oh, you know what? Actually, you had it right the first time. I've just made this a lot worse.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, like, there is a knack to it. I mean, I think like a big part of running a label, I think, is knowing what you like and kind of trusting your judgment about that. And it's sort of like, I mean, I think that a lot of times, like, the most valuable A&R is just to come in and just say, without thinking about it too much, this needs to change or whatever, you know, without getting too granular about it, just giving a kind of like, you know, very kind of like wide level kind of bird's eye view opinion, you know.
Definitely.
And like I said, I think I would have benefited over the years from a bit more of that, to be honest, and my own stuff. But you know, what can you do?
Yeah. And I guess then we've got a little various artists. So I'm full promo mode now. You've opened the promo for the
Go ahead.
Got a little various artists compilation for the end of the year. That's again, first time I've tried that. We'll see how it goes. It's all just an experiment, really, isn't it? You know, like, unless you're releasing, you know, guaranteed artists with a big fan base, you know, you try things out and you see what happens. And I think the main thing that I've learned is that everyone that I release on a label, I've got to be able to imagine having a pint with them in a pub, or I've had to have actually done that. And I think when you get too far away from that, then you lose that sense of, I've said this in a bunch of interviews, but it's true. Like, the best label should feel like a 90s skate team. Do you know what I mean? There's like, they're all individuals. They've all got their own vibe, but you can imagine them hanging out, doing cool stuff together, then going away and doing cool stuff on their own. And it's just that kind of, everyone's different, but they've all got something hanging together. And I think that's really important, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be a no heads policy, hasn't it?
Apart from myself, so yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly. The label owner can fulfill that particular function. But
I've got that nailed.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Sam, mate, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. Been great.
Thanks for having me, man.
Music, not diving, with Scuba.